Okay, so we're going to take a look at the B license test, and why not, right? It's like I got the test right here, so let's go over. So question number one, USPA BSRs state that the container opening for B license skydivers must occur by 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 feet, or 3,500 feet. So what do you think? Give you a little pause. 2.5, right? So that's the lowest that a B license skydiver should be opening their pack. However, it doesn't mean you can't, you have to pull that low. Actually, I think it's a wise move to pull 1,000 feet higher than that. So you have time to work on your canopy skills, time to fix malfunctions or deal with them, right? So number two, USPA B license holder who has not jumped for more than 90 days should A, attend a complete first jump course, kind of extreme, make at least one jump under direct supervision, that's B, of a USPA instructional rating holder. C, perform a clear and pull, hop and pop, from 3,000 feet AGL, or D, perform a static line jump. And the answer is make at least one jump with a USPA instructional rating holder. So number three, below 10,000 feet MSL, and in case you don't know what MSL is, mean sea level, right? So average, meaning the sea level air pressure. It's not about actual altitude. It's about the air pressure equivalent to an average day at the ocean. So below 10,000 feet MSL, each jumper must maintain at least how much vertical distance from any cloud. So how much vertical distance from any cloud? Now that's kind of an interesting thing, because vertical distance, you're talking about above or below. So in this case, they have answers that involve both of those. A is 500 feet below. Give you a hint. 1,000 feet below, no, because the bottom of the clouds are actually kind of flatter, so we're allowed to go a little closer to the cloud from underneath. It allows us also to kind of nudge up to the cloud and do our hop and pops, and the clouds are low. And C is 200 feet above. No, you got to be much above a cloud compared to the below. And D is 500 feet above. So of course the answer is 500 feet below the cloud when you're below 10,000 feet MSL. So number four, with regards to borrowing parachute equipment. A, all jumpers should receive adequate transition training for unfamiliar equipment. So that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? B, transition training is not necessary for licensed skydivers. C, transition training is recommended only for jumpers with fewer than 50 jumps. And D, transition training is recommended for only for jumpers with fewer than 100 jumps. And for question number four, the answer is A, they should receive adequate training for unfamiliar equipment. And it doesn't specify the jump numbers. It also doesn't specify what that training is, but obviously it's appropriate to the distinctions, right? What's different between this equipment and the last one you had. Number five, if a water landing cannot be avoided, a jumper should A, face into the wind, right? So when landing, face into the wind, okay? B, disconnect the chest strap while under canopy to facilitate getting out of the harness, okay? C, prepare for a PLF, and D, all of the above. And according to the United States Parachute Association, you should do all of the above. So, why people say, well, why the heck do you need a PLF? Well, who says the water is going to be deep, right? You could be landing near the side where there's rocks underneath and you can't see them. So I think that's wise, sage advice. Number six, what may result if recovering altitude floating up under free fall formation? So what may result if recovering altitude under a free formation? What could occur? So A, collision with the formation. B, collision with the group that left before you. Interesting. C, collision with the airplane. somebody was smoking something funny when they wrote this test, and D, all of the above. So it is A, of course, collision with the formation itself. And it's kind of hard when you're rising up to a formation, it's kind of hard to see. And if you're looking up at it like this, then you're spilling air and you don't actually get that uplift that you're looking for. So turning sideways, say 90 degrees to the formation, keeping your head down, keep your ear down against the relative wind, and press up that way, you can still kind of see the formation, but at least your body is in a flatter position as opposed to that chin high body position. So number 7, according to the BSRs, the minimum radial distance allowed from the center of the target to the nearest hazard for a B license holder is 25 meters is A, B is 50 meters, C is 75 meters, and D is 100 meters. The answer is B, 50 meters, 50. And of course, that is one of the things that could be wavered under certain circumstances. A lot of these things, distance from water, drownable body of water, and that kind of thing. Sometimes you just have to deal with a hazard at that specific drop zone. And everybody knows that that's a hazard because we land near the beach or something, and we change the rules a little bit just so the drop zone can exist. So number 8, an additional hazard under canopy during night jumps may be, and it says hazards, so it could be more than one, night jumps. A, moon shadow, B, reduced vision, C, impaired depth perception, right? And D, all of the above, and 8 is all of the above. Number 9, so night jump safety briefings should take place immediately prior to the intended night jump. Right, that makes sense, doesn't it? 3 days prior to the intended night jump. Nope. 7 days prior or 30 days prior to the intended night jump. And the reason why USPA, and I continue to recommend that it be right then and there, is you get to learn the specifics of tonight's jump. What's the wind doing? What are the exit order? How are we going to plan all the other details other than the generalities of, what kind of a light are you going to have? Well, here's your strobe, and where are you going to put the strobe? You want to take a flashlight? Well, don't use it in the plane and blind people. There's some things that apply to every night jump, but this is so the specifics are clear in your mind before the jump. Number 10, night vision can begin to deteriorate starting at what altitude? 5,000, 7,000, 9,000, and 15,000 feet as the option. So it says 5,000 feet. Interesting. I mean, I think the night vision can deteriorate at any altitude. We're all kind of different that way, but that's an interesting metrics. I don't know where they got that number from, honestly. Number 11, canopy relative work, also known as crew, should be done with micro-lined canopies only. That's dumb. You'll slice through your skin. Should include a hook knife on each participant. Well, of course. And should be only done by jumpers with more than 1,000 skydives. Come on, no, I had 50 jumps. Requires no special training when using ram air parachutes. No, that's of course not true. You do need special training before you do crew. And I recommend getting the best people that you can to teach you. Crew camps are awesome. So number 12, the minimum break off altitude for belly to earth formation groups of 5 or fewer during a daytime skydive should be at least 1,500 feet higher than the highest planned deployment altitude in the group, or 2,000 feet higher than the highest planned deployment altitude in the group, 2,500 feet higher than the lowest planned altitude deployment altitude in the group, or D, 1,000 feet higher than the highest planned deployment altitude in the group, and that is B, 2,000 feet. So you want to have not just that the tracking time, but also the time to slow down after your track, to wave off and have awareness of what's going on above you before you throw your pilot chute, possibly with a little cushion, right, built into those numbers so that you could delay a little in the event that you're waving off and you see somebody's directly above you, right? And of course, if you see somebody directly below you as you're waving off, throw your pilot chute, assuming nobody's above you, because that person below you is waiting for you so that they can pull. Important idea. All right, so 13, we have for free flying, the first position that a skydiver should become proficient is the A, crazy Y, doesn't exist, B, sit fly, C, head down, and D, mind warp. Mind warp is when one person's sitting or standing, the other person comes up head down and does the Vulcan mind warp. You know, actually, the mind warp is two hands, the one hand is Spock. Not that you need to know that, and not that that should be the first thing you do. It's recommended that you do sit fly. However, I think it's wise to learn how to back fly before you learn to sit fly, because if you lose control when you're learning how to sit fly, you don't want to be going back to your belly and corking up, right? Popping up because of the loss of airspeed. You want to be able to go back to this fast falling back fly position as your emergency position, keeping your speed. Even just bringing your knees up into a cannonball with your arms out, like a, what do they call that? The golden snitch. You know, so that'll help you to keep your speed, get under control, and then you can open back up into the sit without an abrupt loss of airspeed. 14, when free flying, a jumper should A, use, oh, somebody's calling me, but I am not going to answer. So when free flying, a jumper should A, use proper equipment that provides adequate pin and bridle protection regardless of the orientation to the relative wind. Well, that seems like a pretty good answer, doesn't it? But let's continue. B, use an AAD. Well, yeah. C, use at least one audible and one visual altimeter. Or D, all of the above. And yeah, I think that makes sense. Of course, D, all of the above. So 15, what is the quickest and safest way to change heading immediately after opening your parachute? A, pull both front risers down evenly. Interesting. We'll turn the parachute. B, release the brakes and perform a braked turn. Well, that will turn the parachute. C, rear riser turn with the brakes stowed. And D, pull one front riser and the opposite rear riser. Woo! So that doesn't make any sense to me. So obviously that is C for number 15. If you want to do a rear riser turn without taking the time to unstow your brakes, keep in mind when your brakes are still stowed, the parachute wants to keep turning after you stop the input a bit. And if it was a really sharp rear riser turn, it may turn a lot more than you expect, like turn, stop, and then it continues all around. You go, I remember you. So be ready to turn with the rear riser and then stop with the opposite rear riser input, right, to stop the turn. So under canopy, number 16, under canopy brake turns A are an advanced maneuver to be performed only by jumpers with more than 50 jumps. Really? And then we have B, should only be performed above 500 feet AGL. C, provide a heading change while losing the least amount of altitude. C, that sounds pretty good. And D, all of the above. No, it's not all of the above. It is in fact C. However, as you get more skillful, a brake turn may not give you the least amount of altitude loss in, let's say, a 180-degree turn that leads to a flare, because once you finish that brake turn, you can't really flare very effectively. I mean, if you PLF, you're probably going to walk away, but you don't get that full flare effect of leveling off. And so one of the things that we have to cultivate is the ability to do a turn that is smooth, not really dive into the ground hard, but collects a bit of airspeed and loses a little altitude in the first part of that, let's say 180-degree turn, maybe 90 degrees of it, and then you sharply add the brakes and continue that flight path to level flight, completing the turn at the 180-degree point in level flight. You go straight into the landing. Right? So you don't have to do the turn, lift up the brakes, gather a little airspeed, and then flare. You just go turn, flare, and land. So if you get skillful, you can actually get the minimum altitude loss to landing point, landable configuration with that maneuver, but USPA didn't want to address that because it's hard to explain. I don't know why they didn't. Number 17. All right, so each occupant must be provided with supplemental oxygen if flying above what altitude in an unpressurized cabin for any length of time? 14,000 feet MSL, B, 15,000 feet MSL, C, 16, and D, 17,000 feet above sea level. And that answer is B, 15,000 feet. So 18. Reserve parachutes must have been packed within the previous blank before the day of its use if the canopy is made of nylon, rayon, or similar synthetic fiber. Now, I haven't seen a lot of rayon parachutes, but that's interesting that they chose to include that. So 120 is A, B is 180, and 4 months is C, and 6 months is D. So this is a tricky one because if you add it up, because some of these seem to overlap, but we count in days, not months, with the FAA regulations, and that is 180 days is now the number. It used to be 120 back when I started, back in the olden days. 19, when performing front riser maneuvers, what should you do with the steering toggles? A, keep them in your hands. B, place them back on the rear risers. C, let go and re-grip just before landing. And D, attach them to the front risers. I don't know how you would do that. So that kind of goes without saying, doesn't it? 19, A, keep them in your hands. You never know if you're going to need them. It's possible that when you do a front riser input, that the ground is going to show up quickly, or if you're at higher altitude, that front riser input in some cases could result in a canopy collapse, and you're going to need those brakes to fix your parachute. Less the issue nowadays. Most parachutes fly pretty well on the front risers if the brakes are long enough, right? If you've got sufficient slack in the brake lines. 20. How long must a pilot wait after consuming alcohol prior to flying? A, 24 hours, B, 12 hours, C, 10 hours, D, 8 hours. And that is the answer, 8 hours. So I don't know if you've heard of 8 hours bottle to throttle. That's what we'd say. And there's quite a few pilots that have pushed that limit, I think. All right, so 21, before downsizing to a smaller canopy, jumpers should be familiar with which of the following maneuvers with the current canopy? A, flaring for landing from braked flight. B, consistent stand-up landings within 10 meters of a target. C, beginning the flare, turning to 10-degree bank, and then returning to wings level before landing, or D, all of the above. And it is in fact all of the above and more. This is not an exhaustive list. So that last one is basically talking about being able to flare and actually change your heading a little bit, right? So it's referring to 10 degrees of bank angle, but that's really an arbitrary figure. The question is, can you turn, let's say, 30 degrees to the right and left from your original heading, so that, for instance, you can blend into the wind line in a crosswind approach, so that you can avoid the obstacle that's in front of you, so that you can make a little bit of a curve so that you don't overshoot your landing area. Sometimes during the flare, you realize that you're just gonna, blaze on into the fence. And a little bit of a heading change with minimal bank angle is gonna allow you to shorten your distance to that obstacle by quite a lot. So 22, before attempting any advanced canopy landing maneuvers, jumpers should become familiar with the maneuver by practicing at a minimum altitude at or above 600 feet AGL, B, 1,000 feet AGL, C, 2,000 feet AGL, or D, 2,500 feet AGL. And USPA is recommending 2,500 feet. So it gives you enough time to recover from a problem, or if you're experimenting with things like stall and recovery, where theoretically you give yourself line twists and you actually have to cut away and dump your reserve, You want to be well above that altitude. You're not pushing that decision altitude, right? So 23, regardless of the wing loading, any canopy smaller than blank square feet is considered to be an advanced piece of equipment. 200 square feet is A, B is 190, C is 170, and D is 150 square feet. And that is the answer. And I'd say that's a valid point. Now, it doesn't mean that a 170 isn't dangerous. I've seen 190s kill people too. I've seen 190s where people just, they downsize from a 210 when it seemed right down to the 190, but the ground was coming up fast enough, faster than they're used to, that they flared late and low and broke their legs. It wasn't horrible, but it's a bad day and they don't get to jump for quite a while, all because they weren't truly ready for it. And part of that needs to be about the briefing. And when you go down to a smaller parachute, regardless of the wing loading, and this is an important concept, is the parachute has a greater descent rate. It's got a worse glide ratio. And when you turn it, it will lose more altitude in the turn. So when you get down to 150, things do get real. It has to do with the volume changing. So there's the area that we use to measure the canopy size. But as you go smaller in size, in terms of the area, the rate of shrinkage of the volume of the parachute increases. So you're not dealing with a linear progression in terms of the volume, and the volume really does determine how much drag the parachute has, which changes the glide ratio. The smaller canopy sits a little bit forward because it has less drag, and it has a divier glide. Even at a lighter wing loading, that 150 could have a worse glide, a longer recovery arc, and the higher rate of descent as you're coming into land. So please, when you look at these wing loading numbers, you should be at 1 pound per square foot. If you're 120 pounds soaking wet, you really shouldn't be on a 135. When you add the reserve to it and everything else, it's still going to be too small a parachute. So that's what this was getting at. And I think it's great that they included that idea. 24, during night jumps, a light that is visible for at least 3 statute miles is required to be turned on and operating. A, during the entire freefall. B, once under an open parachute until landing. C, both A and B. D, neither A nor B. And the answer is B, once under an open parachute until landing. Because we don't want to blind people, right? If that light is so bright that somebody 3 miles away can see it, everybody in your formation is going to be blind. It's really a bright thing. So the idea is to flip that on after you get open, which means that you need to be well versed in the operation of your equipment and be able to do it in the dark, right? So 25, regarding the canopy descent during night jumps. Each jumper should, A, avoid spiral turns during the entire descent. B, avoid spiraling turns once below 2,000 feet above the ground. C, avoid spiral turns below 1,000 feet. Or D, spiraling down to 1,000 feet to reduce the amount of time under canopy. So the answer to me is it's very obviously A, don't spiral on a night jump. You can't see what's below you very effectively. Even if they have a strobe, it could very well be that you can't see that strobe because there's a parachute in between you and the strobe, right? And so you don't realize you're spiraling right through somebody's top skin. Hold your space, right? Vertically hold your space. And it's nice to be able to plan out who's open at what altitude, and do that based on sustainable separation. The little canopy on the high side, that's above a bigger canopy is going to sink down towards them. So sustainable separation would be the heavier wing loadings open a little bit lower and the lighter wing loadings higher, so that the separation vertically increases over time. Just a thought. So these are the 25 questions that USPA has on their test for the B license. I hope you enjoyed this. I've been wanting to do this for a while, finally got around to it. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Good luck with your license test.